Hurry up, guys, to join the stream, guys. Hello, Tony. How are you, dear Tony? Thank you so much for joining to stream, making the like and subscribing to the channel. A lot of love and respect for you joining. What's up, dear? Thank you so much for joining to stream. I have a lot of love and respect for you joining to stream. Hello dear, thank you so much for joining to stream. I love you. Thank you so much for you joining, my dear. A lot of love and respect for you joining. Every respected every respected member have to join the today's stream, guys. Our today first member is a Tony, guys. Uh, Tony, how are you, Tony? Thank you so much for you joining to stream, dear Tony. Thank you so much for your joining, dear Tony. A lot of love and respect for your joining. Thank you so much for your joining to stream. What's your name, beauty? What's your name there? Every respected member have to write your name in the chat. Yeah, guys, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Mona, how are you there, Mona? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Mona. How are you, dear Mona? A lot of love and respect for you joining, Mona. Mackie, how are you, Mackie? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Mackie. Hurry up, guys, making a lot and subscribing to the channel to spread the love, guys. Yeah, to spread the love on the screen. A lot of love and respect for you joining to stream, guys. Every respecting member have to write your name in the chat, guys. Thank you so much for you joining, guys. To write your name in the chat, a lot of love and respect for you joining to stream, guys. Riley, how are you, dear Riley? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Riley. Yeah, guys, to write your name in the chat and send the laughing disco for the appreciation. Leah, how are you, dear Leah? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Hi, Riley. How are you, dear Riley? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Riley. Jana, how are you, dear Jana? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Jana. Hurry up, guys. Thank you. Welcome, dear. Welcome. Leah, can you do the super chat pretty, or can you send the laughing disco, my dear? Eden, how are you, dear Eden? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Yeah, if you can easily to make a small donation, my dear. Thank you so much for you joining. Arinta, how are you, dear Arinta? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Arinta. Thank you so much for you joining, my dear. Harry, how are you, dear Harry? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Every respected member had to write your name in the chat, guys. Nia, how are you, dear Nia? Thank you so much for your joining. Going, how are you, dear Going? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat. Adam, how are you, dear Adam? Thank you so much for joining, Adam. To collect on the goal, guys, do the super chat by the goal, send the laughing disco. Wasif, how are you, Wasif? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Wasif. Thank you so much for your joining there. Dulcie, how are you there, Dulcie? Thank you so much for joining to sit around there. A lot of love and respect. Ari, how are you there, Ari? Thank you so much for joining to sit around, Ari. Sylvia, how are you there, Sylvia? Thank you so much for joining to sit around, Sylvia. Please, guys, send a laughing disco or do a super chat, guys. Alvin, how are you there, Alvin? Thank you so much for joining to sit around there, Alvin. Clara, how are you there, Clara? Thank you so much for joining to sit around. A lot of love and respect for you joining. Hurry up, guys, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Every respecting member, Saka, how are you dear Saka? Thank you so much for joining to sit ring dear Saka. Please, guys, send a laughing disco, guys. Lanoon, how are you dear Lanoon? Thank you so much for joining to sit ring Lanoon. Thank you so much for your joining dear Lanoon. Ryan, how are you dear Rayhan? Thank you so much for joining to sit ring dear Rayhan. Alana, how are you dear Alana? Thank you so much for joining dear Alana. A lot of love and respect. Amir, how are you Amir? Thank you so much for joining dear Amir. Asi, how are you dear Asi? Thank you so much for joining dear Asi. Wayat, how are you dear Wayat? Thank you so much for joining to sit around, my dear. Lily, how are you pretty Lily? Thank you so much for joining, Lily. How are you dear Lily? Thank you so much for your joining. Yeah, guys, every respected member have to write your name in the chat, guys. To send the laughing disco, do the super chat for the appreciation, guys. I have to love and respect for you joining to a room, guys. Carlos, sorry dear Carlos, thank you so much for joining, dear Carlos. Hurry up, guys, to join the stream, guys, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Rose, how are you, dear Rose? Thank you so much for your joining, dear Rose. Yeah, guys, to write your name in the chat, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Emma, how are you, pretty Emma? How are you, Emma? Thank you so much for your joining to stream, dear Emma. Thank you so much for your joining. Lydia, how are you, dear Lydia? Thank you so much for joining, dear Lydia. A lot of love and respect for your joining. Ghana, how are you, dear Ghana? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Ghana. Hurry up, guys, making the like and subscribing to the channel. VJ, how are you, dear VJ? Thank you so much for joining to stream, guys. Please, guys, send the laughing disco, do the super chat, guys. Mina, how are you, Mina? Thank you so much for your joining, Mina. Every respecting member have to write your name in the chat, guys. I want to know from the every respecting member where are you from watching, guys? Shahir, how are you, Shahir? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Shahir. Sorde, how are you, dear Sorde? Thank you so much for joining to stream, my dear. A lot of love and respect for your joining. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat. Lamia, how are you, dear Lamia? Thank you so much for joining, Lamia. How are you, Lamia? Please, guys, someone has to send the laughing disco. Jax, how are you, dear Jax? Thank you so much for joining. Saison, how are you, Saison? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Saison. Thank you so much for joining. Kendo, how are you, dear Kendo? Thank you so much for joining. Tamina, how are you? Tamina, thank you so much for joining. Pretty Tamina, thank you so much for your joining. Jax, I write your name, my dear. Yash, how are you, dear Yash? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Yash. Zevar, how are you, dear Zevar? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Zevar. Uh, Jack, how are you, dear Jack? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Jack. Gullosi, how are you, dear Gullosi? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Every respecting member have to write your name in the chat. Hurry up guys, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Halle, hurry dear Halle, thank you so much for joining to stream, Halle. Yeah guys, if you can easily to do a blue super chat guys. Asbela, hurry dear Asbela, thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Asbela. Hmm. Hurry up guys, to write your name in the chat guys. Lady, hurry dear lady, thank you so much for joining. Miku, how are you dear Miku? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Miku. Thank you so much for joining, dear Miku. Arwa, how are you dear Arwa? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Arwa. Hurry up guys to write your name. Alan, how are you dear Alan? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Alan. Hurry up guys to write your name in the chat guys. Steggy, how are you dear Steggy? Thank you so much for joining to stream, my dear. Vikram, how are you dear Vikram? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Vikram. Brandy, how are you dear Brandy? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Brandy. Hurry up guys. Baza, how are you dear Baza? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Baza. Yeah guys, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Variety, how are you dear Variety? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Chaya, how are you Chaya? Mila, how are you dear Mila? Thank you so much for joining, Mila. Jones, how are you dear Jones? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Jones. Hurry up guys. Gorasi, how are you dear Gorasi? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Gorasi. Thank you so much for your joining to stream. Cozy, how are you dear Cozy? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Amin, how are you dear Amin? Thank you so much for joining to stream, dear Amin. Hurry up guys to make the like and subscribing to the channel. JD, how are you dear JD? Thank you so much for joining. Please guys, someone have to send the laughing disco or super chat, or you can also send the follow stick guys. Eva, how are you dear Eva? To skip the line, do the super chat guys. For skip the line, do the super chat. Aku, how are you dear Aku? Thank you so much for joining to stream. Asin, how are you dear Asin? Thank you so much for joining to stream guys. Miku, how are you dear Miku? Thank you so much for joining, Miku. Bassi, how are you dear Bassi? Thank you so much for joining to stream, Bassi. A lot of love and respect. Nari, how are you doing, Nari? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim. Keep sharing, guys. Keep tapping and keep sharing. Adam, how are you, dear Adam? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, Adam. Sagar, how are you, dear Sagar? Thank you so much for joining, dear Sagar. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat. Christopher, how are you, Christopher? I have to write. I'm writing the name of everyone, guys. You have to skip the line, do the super chat, guys. I'll send a laughing disco. I'll follow state. Nissaner, how are you, Nissaner? Thank you so much for joining, Nissaner. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat. Gretel, how are you, dear Gretel? Thank you so much for joining, Gretel. I mean, I write your name, my dear. Hurry up, guys, to write your name. Daniel, how are you, Daniel? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, Daniel. Hi, bro. Thank you so much for joining. Nana, how are you, dear Nana? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Nana. A lot of love and respect. Nathan, how are you, Nathan? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Nathan. Prado, how are you, dear Prado? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, Prado. Hello, bro. Hello, bro. Hello, Nana. How are you, Nana? Thank you so much for joining, Nana. Vera, how are you, dear Vera? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Vera. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Asla, how are you, Asla? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim. Every respected member have to write your name in the chat. Do the super chat, guys. Jones, how are you, dear Jones? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Jones. Thank you so much for your joining. Nissaner, how are you, Nissaner? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, Nissaner. Thank you so much for joining. Lasila, how are you, dear Lasila? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Lasila. Omar, how are you, dear Omar? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Omar. Aidan, how are you, dear Aidan? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim. Masood, how are you, Masood? Thank you so much for joining to the Citterim, dear Masood. Rafi, how are you, dear Rafi? Thank you so much for joining, dear Rafi. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat, guys. Yoni, how are you, dear Yoni? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, Yoni. Yeah, guys, do the super chat for skipping the line. Summer, how are you, dear Summer? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, Summer. Hamad, how are you, dear Hamad? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Hamad. Please, guys, do the super chat for skipping the line, guys, and send the laughing disco for the appreciation. Thank you so much, Louis. How are you, Louis? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim. Henry, how are you, dear Henry? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim. Hamad, I write your name, my lovely brother. Thank you so much for your joining. Iman, how are you, dear Iman? Thank you so much for joining to Citterim, dear Iman. Please, guys, do the super chat, guys. Taz, how are you, Taz? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Hurry up, guys. Salman, how are you, Salman? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Salman. I have a lot of love and respect. Samad, how are you, dear Samad? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Kalaj, how are you, dear Kalaj? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Kalaj. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat, guys. To make the like and subscribing to the channel. Aza, how are you, dear Aza? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. X-Chal, how are you, dear X-Chal? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, X-Chal. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat, guys. Sophia, how are you, Sophia? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Sophia. A lot of love and respect for your joining. Tamman, how are you, dear Tamman? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Making the like, guys, and subscribing to the channel. A lot of love and respect for your joining. Ali, how are you, dear Ali? Thank you so much for joining, Ali. Yasmin, how are you, Yasmin? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Yasmin. Mahira, how are you, Mahira? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, Mahira. Rishi, how are you, dear Rishi? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Rishi. Mohi, how are you, Mohi? Please, guys, send a laughing disco or do a super chat, guys, for the appreciation, guys. Thank you so much for your joining. Christina, how are you, Christina? Thank you so much for joining, Christina. How are you, dear Christina? Thank you so much for your joining. Azbek, how are you, Azbek? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, Azbek. Thank you so much for joining, Azbek. Hurry up, guys. Every single person have to write your name in the chat, guys. Do like and subscribing to the channel. Christina, I write your name, my dear. Eva, how are you, dear Eva? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Eva. Silu, how are you, Silu? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Silu. Narbol, how are you, Narbol? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Jax, how are you, Jax? Thank you so much for joining, my dear. Mina, how are you, Mina? Unnaku, how are you, Unnaku? Christina, how are you, Christina? How are you, Christina? Kristan, how are you, Kristan? Martin, how are you, Martin? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Martina. Samuel, how are you, dear Samuel? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Samuel. Stalu, how are you, dear Stalu? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, Stalu. And Damned, how are you, Damned? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, Damned. Zalan, how are you, dear Zalan? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Zalan. A lot of love and respect for you joining. Nara, how are you, dear Nara? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Please, guys, do the super chat, guys. Send the laughing disco for the appreciation, guys. Julie, how are you, Julie? How are you, dear Julie? Thank you so much for joining. Hi, Julie. How are you, Julie? Thank you so much for your joining, my dear. Ranim, how are you, Ranim? Thank you so much for joining to Sitarim, Rani. Clement, how are you, Clement? Thank you so much for joining to Sitarim. Dana, how are you, dear Dana? Thank you so much for joining to Sitarim, dear Dana. A lot of love and respect. Yusuf, how are you, Yusuf? Thank you so much for joining to Sitarim, dear Yusuf. Please, guys, touch the goal, guys. Yeah, touch the goal, guys. Do a super chat. Do a super chat, guys. It's not a big, guys. Have a small donation. Do a small donation, guys. Oaisa, how are you, dear Oaisa? Thank you so much for joining, Oaisa. Aziz back. I write your name, my dear. Mia, how are you, Mia? Thank you so much for joining, dear Mia. A lot of love and respect. Niku, how are you, Niku? Kalat, how are you, Kalat? How are you, Kalat? Where are you from watching, dear Kalat? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Gulnas, how are you, Gulnas? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Jalioni, how are you, dear Jalioni? Thank you so much for your joining, Jalioni. Thank you so much. Welcome, dear. Welcome. Anybody can do a super chat, guys. Have to make a small super chat, guys. Lamb, how are you, dear Lamb? Yeah, guys, click on my goal to make a small donation, guys. To make a small donation, anybody have to make a small donation, guys. Jaloni, how are you, Jaloni? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Riley, how are you, Riley? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Riley. Maddie, how are you, dear Maddie? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Riley, I write your name, my dear. Maddie, how are you, dear Maddie? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Carlton, how are you, dear Carlton? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain. Brooke, how are you, Brooke? Thank you so much for joining Twisted Terrain, dear Brooke. Leah, how are you, dear Leah? Thank you so much for joining, Leah. Hurry up, guys. Anybody do the super chat, guys. Click on the money icon. Yeah, guys, the right corner you will be showing the money icon, guys. Click on the money icon to do a super chat, guys. Yeah, do a super chat, guys. Vinci, how are you, dear Vinci? To do a super chat, guys. Thank you so much for your joining, dear Vinci. Hurry up, guys, to write your name in the chat, making the like and subscribing to the channel. Cam, how are you there, Cam? Thank you so much for joining to City Rim, Cam. Wade, how are you there, Wade? Thank you so much for joining to City Rim. Acor, how are you, Acor? Thank you so much for you joining. Welcome there. Please, guys, somebody click on the money icon, guys. Click on the money icon to do the super chat. Nicole, how are you there, Nicole? Thank you so much for joining to City Rim, Nicole. How are you, Nicole? Darren, how are you there, Darren? Thank you so much for joining to stream there, Darren. Sam, how are you, Sam? Please, guys, click on the money icon, do the super chat, guys. Or send a laughing disco, yeah, guys. Send a laughing disco. Alexis, how are you, Alexis? Thank you so much for your joining, dear Alexis. Hurry up, guys. Shade, how are you, dear Shade? Thank you so much for joining to City Ring. Hello, dear. Hello. Holly, how are you, dear Holly? Thank you so much for joining, my dear. Every respected member have to write your name in the chat, guys. Lena, how are you, dear Lena? Thank you so much for joining, dear Lena. A lot of love and respect, Lena. Hi, Sanjeev. How are you, Sanjeev? Thank you so much for joining to the stream, dear Sanjeev. Late, how are you, dear Late? Thank you so much for joining to the stream, dear Late. Please, guys, someone has do the super chat, guys. Yeah, click on the money icon to do the super chat. Mariam, how are you, Mariam? Thank you so much for joining to stream, pretty Mariam. Thank you so much, Mariam. Aria, how are you, Aria? Hurry up, guys, making the like and subscribing to the channel. 1 second, guys, just wait a while. I will write the name of every person. Lara, how are you, Lara? Sorry, Lyra, how are you, Lyra? Thank you, Lyra. Ishal, how are you, dear Ishal? Where is the last person? The last person is not here right now, my dear. She is sleeping right now, yeah. Thanks, welcome. Anybody can do the super chat, guys. Please, guys, if can you can easily to make a donation, guys. Click on the money icon to do the super chat, guys. Antonia, thank you to Antonia. Amir, how are you, Amir? Thank you so much for joining, dear Amir. A lot of love and respect. Lalina, thank you so much for joining, Lalina. Can you support Justin more a crush on him? Justin, hi Justin. Yeah, let me write your name as Justin. You're from Russia, by the way. Thank you for joining from the Russia. Justin. Justin, where are you from watching, Justin? Okay, Justin, that's okay. You are from Brazil. Oh, that's great. That's great. Sosa, that's great. You are watching from Brazil. So you should make a super chat. You are watching from Brazil. Yeah, you make a small donation. Click on the goal. Click on the goal or click on the money icon to do the donation for the appreciation. Yeah, Mia, how are you, pretty Mia? My goal is not big. Yeah, my goal is not big. It's a small. I have only $2 for the donation. Laura, how are you, Laura? Where are you from? What language do you speak? I have to speak different languages, my dear. Laura, how are you, Laura? Khushi, how are you, Khushi? Rajit, how are you, Raj? Ritaj, how are you, Ritaj? Abe, how are you, Abe? Rashi, how are you, Rashi? Hmm. Wally, how are you, Wally? Ima, how are you, dear Ima?